my experience has been that people can do a tremendous amount of good for themselves and for the people who are immediately around them by looking to their own inadequacies and their own flaws and the things that they're not doing in their lives and starting to build themselves up as more powerful individuals. And if they're capable of doing that, and then they're capable of expanding their career. And if they're capable of expanding their career and their competence, then they're capable of taking their place in the community as effective leaders. And then they're capable of making wise decisions instead of unwise decisions when it comes to making collective political decisions. I'm not suggesting in the least, and have never suggested, that there's no domain for social action. I'm suggesting that people who don't have their own houses in order should be very careful before they go about reorganizing the world.
What I'm advocating is that we each take responsibility for the cultural transformation by realizing that it is not something which will be disseminated from the top down. It is something which each of us can contribute to by attempting to live as far into the future as possible. You know, we must get rid of the conceptions of the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. We must smear the historical moment and become exemplars of the humanity of the end time. And those of you who attended my lecture this afternoon about time know that I believe that liberation, or let's even say decency, as a human quality, is an actual resonance and anticipation of this future perfected state of humanity. And we can will the perfect future into being by becoming microcosms of the perfect future, and no longer casting blame outward on institutions or hierarchies of responsibility and control, but by realizing that the opportunity is here, the responsibility is here, and the two may never be congruent again, and the salvation of your immortal soul may depend on what you do with the opportunity.
Amen.
So what do you do with the opportunity?
Or how starting to clean up the room changed their life. That's quite fun because it's something I always tell people to do instead of going out and protesting. Jesus, I just can't stand that.
Cleaning up the room?
Yeah.
Meaning?
Well, my sense is that if you want to change the world, you start from yourself and work outward because you build your competence that way. It's like, I don't know how you can go out and protest the structure of the entire economic system if you can't keep your room organized.
Yeah, isn't that an issue with people, though, that they always want to enact some sort of control over the outside world when their inside is all fucked up?
Yeah, well, it's
those
also
are the people that are the most adamant about it?
Well, I think there's some truth in that. I think there is truth in that. I mean, people try to change the outside world for lots of ways, but many of those ways aren't just pure good. But, you know, I've thought about, well, I made a video call, which was called Message to Millennials, where it was called How to Change the World Properly. A bit of on the pretentious side, I suppose, but I was trying to produce something that was a counterposition to this idea that what you should do is go out and fix up other people. You know, that's just not right. And there's a New Testament line about that, something about, you know, not worrying too much about the log in your neighbor's eye or about the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your eye. It's like, yes, no kidding, but, you know, do you really want to face that? And so what I've thought about is that, well, what you start to do is you start to tell and act out the truth locally, like within the domain of your actual competence, you know, because the world presents itself as a series of puzzles, some of which you're capable of solving and some of which you're not. And you have many puzzles in front of you that you could solve, but you choose not to. You know, those are the things that weigh on your conscience. It's like, you know, well, I should really do this, but you don't. It's like, so I had this idea a long time ago because the world is a pretty dreadful place. I thought, well, what would the world be like if people stopped avoiding the things they knew they should do? You know, because the question is, how much are we contributing to the fact that life is an existential catastrophe and a tragedy? How much is our own corruption contributing to that? That's a really worthwhile question. Things you leave undone because you're angry, you're resentful, you're lazy, you have inertia. Well, you consult your conscience and it says, well, you know, that place over there could use a little work. It's the same as working on yourself. And so you clean that up because you can. And then things are a little clearer around you. And you're a little better off because you've practiced a bit. And so you're a little stronger. And then something else manifests itself and says, well, maybe you could like take a crack at fixing me up too. So you decide to do that. And then that gets a little bit more pristine. You know, and soon, and it's humble because you're not exceeding your domain of competence. This idea of getting your room sorted out, I'll give you a little Christian interpretation about that too. So it says in the New Testament that the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. And of course a mustard seed is very, very small.
Very small.
It will build itself, given the proper circumstances, into quite a magnificent and complex, fully developed plant, almost a tree. And so when you make your room perfect, then that's a mustard seed that's equivalent to heaven. That's what you're doing, is that's what you're doing,
yeah.
is you're building a little microcosm of the kingdom of God on earth. And that will have, like, if you do it correctly, that will have power.
Is it all okay? Is there a political agenda? What should be done? And, you know, it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, what you do has very little importance, and it's very important that you do it. And I think that's how we have to act. We have to each choose a small area and then act in that limited area with all the existential commitment we can muster.
These things that repeat every single day, that's a motif in this book too. Your life isn't margaritas on a beach in Jamaica. That happens now and then. Those are exceptions. Your life is how your wife greets you at the door when you come home every day. Because that's like 10 minutes a day. Your life is how you treat each other over the breakfast table. Because that's an hour and a half or an hour every single day. You get those mundane things right, those things you do every day. You concentrate on them and you make them pristine. It's like you got 80% of your life put together. These little things that are right in front of us, they're not little. That's the first thing. They are not little, and they're hard to set right. And if you set them right, it has a rippling effect, and fast too, way faster than people think.
Anybody who thinks that you're going to save the world by setting it on fire is going to be sadly disabused. So it's a rare moment for the collectivity to try to anchor itself in larger visions. You know, the reason human society is haunted by messiahs and tin horn visionaries preaching on every corner and people waving little books of different colors is because there is no full development of the individual. There's this kind of arrested, prolonged adolescence, and it's created through institutions. Institutions are a demonic force in human life because they give permission for us to cease developing.
And if you can't be grateful for the structure of the university with all its imperfections, then you're completely blind to this element of the archetype. And that's the opposite of it. That's the son that devours, the king that devours his own son. That's a tyrant. You know, that's like the mother who's too overprotective. It's the male version of that. And the mother that's too overprotective says, I'll never let anything happen to you. It's like, well, maybe you actually want to have something happen to you. You know, it's a bit of an all-inclusive statement. It's like, no, I'm going to make you strong so any number of things can happen to you. And when you need some care, I'll be there. But otherwise, like out into the world with you. That's the right attitude. And for the father, it's like, get your bloody act together. But I'm on your side. It's not because I want to destroy you or demean you or push you down in the dominance hierarchy, but because I want the best in you to emerge.
What it comes down to is responsibility. Politics without responsibility is fascism. And politics responsibly practiced is, the only other option available.
Well, look, one of the things you could do for young people that no one's doing is to talk to them about responsibility. Because everyone talks to young people about rights. It's like, we need our rights. It's like, oh God,
how many rights do you need? You know, really, like you have more privileges than any people who've ever lived anywhere. Well, it's so dull to hear that. It's so dull. It's so pathetic and what would you call it? It's so demeaning that you have to be protected and have your rights. It's like I said, there's a huge marketplace for responsibility. That's what you want to talk to young people about.
All this goes back to this theme of the primacy of experience, recapturing the primary importance of yourself, first of all, and then your affinity group, the people around you.
The world is full of darkness, let's say. And we could say each of us have a little bit of light. And if we release that light, if we let it shine properly, Christ, it's too cliched to go on with in some sense, but the world is a lesser place if you do not reveal from within yourself what you have to reveal. And the fact that the world is a lesser place actually turns out not to be trivial. Like if you aren't everything you could be, more people will die, more people will suffer, more evil will be unconstrained, more tyranny will reign, more chaos will remain chaotic and dangerous, all of that.
Do you mean this by this in the sense of like the old proverb of the wings of a butterfly fluttering become a hurricane?
It's something similar to that, but it can even be more local. It's like your family is more messed up than it could be if you were less messed up than you are.
Right.
So if you just got your act together, like 10% more, your family would be 1% better.
Right.
It's like, well, do it.
And that would ripple off into the people that they interact with.
Yes, and it ripples fast.
Yes.
That's the other thing that's so cool is that, like, people think, well, there's 7 billion of us, and each of us is just this separate dust mote, like floating in the cosmos, and what the hell difference does it make what you do anyways? It's like, that is not how we're connected. It's like, you're the center of a network, and you know way more people than this, but let's say typically, you're going to know 1,000 people in your life, well enough to have an impact on them, okay? And each of those 1,000 people is going to know 1,000 people. So you're 1 step from 1,000,000 and 2 steps from 1,000,000,000. And we are networked, technically. That's how human interactions work. And so when you do something that you shouldn't do, it's worse than you think. And when you do something that you should do, it's better than you think.
We should all take complete responsibility for ourselves.
This is why I've been telling people, well, clean up your room.
So I think it's a good exercise to take responsibility for it.